Thank you.
Okay, so we're here to talk about once your startup grows, how do you hire and make sure you've got the right talent and the right people on board? So to start off, how do you set out to hire the right people for your startup? Would you like to take a stab at this, Polina?
You want me to go first?
Go for it.
Well, I think it's important to start with kind of what's your job as a CEO, if the CEO is the one who's hiring. And I think that kind of number one is to get a strategy that makes sense. Know who your customer is going to be, know who your competitors are, know how you're going to solve their problems. And two, I think, is getting the right team. And I think there's a big difference between stages of company when you're in the early stages and when you're in the sort of scaling stages. So at my last company, I was the first employee. I would go to work and it was just me. By the time I left, there was 500, and we were a public company. And I noticed along the way that it was a very different set of needs. I think in the early stages, having people who are very passionate about what you're trying to do, because you're going to get a lot of bad news. You're going to get knocked down all the time. People will tell you that it's not going to work. And you need people who believe in what you're trying to do, because you're going to face a lot of disappointment. Also in the early stages, you're trying to figure out, some people call it product market fit. You're trying to figure out what the business should be. So people who are very curious, very smart, have a sense of urgency, want to figure it out is important. And I think you don't want people who are looking for the money or who are looking for celebrity or have something other than just like figuring out how to solve this problem so that you can grow and be a bigger company.
I personally couldn't agree more. I definitely seen in growing JobToday that at different stages of a company, you need different talent. When you are small, it's not so much about people who know how to manage what other people have built. It's really about building and creating. So when you bring very senior talent on board, a little bit maybe too early in the stage of a company, these are people who know and have experienced with managing things which other people have built already.
Yep.
So they might not be as useful in that particular stage if you are still growing, if you are still building.
Mm-hmm. So how does the culture change as you scale, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, in the beginning, it's a real family affair. It feels like a family, and you know each other intimately. And if the chemistry is really good between the people, you can do anything. Then if you grow, you need other skills. So you need much more professional skills. Things become more structured. And then the culture is changing. So it's, perhaps you know about storming, norming, and forming. So through each stage, you first have a storm, then you have the norms, so you set new rules, and then you form, and you're able to grow again.
How do you maintain your company's mission when you're opening offices around the globe? How do you maintain the mission, the objective of the startup and where you're coming from, your mission, and then take it when you're opening new offices, which can be all around the globe?
Yeah. I think as a founder, you have to be the role model. So you set the values, and you need to be able to transmit these values. You have to be the role model. If you want to scale to other countries, then it's extremely important that you hire the right people, because it starts there. And then what is also very effective, to bring everybody together, and also to exchange people within countries. So if you have a very good team, then you send somebody from your own team to that country to also get the right culture.
Good.
From our experience, once again, as a mobile startup, you very quickly start to work with a distributed team as you're opening new countries and you're opening new markets. There is one really important challenge which you will face. This is communication. So to us, communication is key. It's easier said than done, because in a startup, you all know, we are super busy. Everybody has 100 things to do. People might even work in different time zones. But it's absolutely crucial to keep the communication flowing and to actually set aside time, like just time to to talk about what's important. What have we achieved all together as a company this week, this last 2 weeks, this month, and to be able to connect to your employees, not only as employees, but really on a human level. We really try to set aside time to just do things together. Organize offsites, do things together, play sports, whatever, do team building. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have, because in a startup, as you rightly said, we are creating, we are building, we are innovating. And if you need to create this environment where people want to share ideas and collaborate together, it's really important for them to know each other and also to connect and feel comfortable to express themselves.
I think one other thing I'd mention is that if you're thinking about a company that's going to be very large, I think it's important to look at the company as a system. And I think especially when you're an early entrepreneur, maybe a founder, it so much emanates from you and the first few leaders that it's easy to kind of get trapped into thinking that the company knows how to run itself. But if you really want to scale the business, it should not be dependent on any single person, including the founder and CEO. If you think about it as a system, and you think about if the individuals weren't here, what system and processes can ensure that we preserve and reinforce our values, that we recruit the same kinds of people? And you know, HR doesn't get a lot of respect, but I'll tell you, I think the HR processes that you put in place for how the system, the business runs and grows as a system are really important, because ultimately you want the institution to be able to grow itself without relying on the entrepreneur or the founder that started. In the early days, it's that way, but if you really want it to scale, you have to create institutional processes for the system to grow without relying on you personally.
You raise a good point. So how do you know when you've gotten to the point that you need to move beyond the founders and co-founders, and how do you deal with that? Because there's a lot of emotional investment at stake, time at stake. How do you make sure you have the right people in the right positions?
So when we got at my last company, I was 27 when we started, and the two VCs who funded me were NEA and Foundation Capital, and both of them independently, they say it was independently, took me out to dinner and said, "You're probably going to get fired in the first 6 months." And they said, "This is just what happens. I mean, you're a young person, you haven't done it before, probably you're not going to be the right person, we'll give you a shot, good luck." And my reaction was, "Thank you for the chance." And my thought was, you know, every day I'm going to try to figure out what I need to do to be good enough for this job. And I didn't know what I was doing, so I was going to have to learn quickly. And a big part of it for me was hiring people who could give me feedback for what I needed to do to earn my job every day, and to trust them and to listen to their feedback, and every day try to take my performance up to a higher level. And I think you know that you're outscaling a person when they can't keep up with the growth of the company, whether that's lack of management skills, expertise, time, energy, creativity, whatever. Usually it's sort of a leadership bottleneck that comes from lack of ability to delegate and sort of extend influence without being a personally effective person. I mean, influence through people is a huge part of being a scalable leader.
Ilonka, we were talking about mistakes that recruitments have made along the way. Can you talk about your experience and how recruiters have made mistakes and what you learned from it?
Well, how companies make mistakes. I think if you see an opportunity in the market, you should hire up front. So you have to overhire almost to take the opportunity when the opportunity is there. And another mistake you often see, if the product market fit is not there yet, to scale the sales too quickly. You have some really good salespeople, and they can sell everything. But if the churn is then too high, then you're just bringing water to the sea. So you need really to have a fantastic product before you scale your sales.
You mentioned before making sure that you have the right people in the right positions. What are the right people? How do you know you have the right people? Go for it, Polina.
Yeah. Well, how do you know you have right people? Well, clearly it all depends. First of all, do you know what you want? I think that's one question you should answer yourself first. When you are hiring for the position, just keep in mind what it is I expect of this position, what it is I want this person to do. I think it's easier to hire for these roles then. As I mentioned earlier, I believe there are very different profiles and very different type of professionals you would be hiring through different life stages of your company. You would definitely be looking for different skills. One crucial thing, though, for a startup when you are growing is to keep in mind the personality of candidates which you are hiring for. Working in a startup is a very special environment. It's not news for anyone. Roles evolve, they change very fast. People will be wearing different hats, and their roles will change through the story of life. Growth is not something everyone can handle. So you need to hire candidates where you see that this person has ability to adapt and to grow with you. That would be my view.
And my thought is that very similar. There are some things that are going to be that I think should be common across the whole team. I think people have to be honest. Personally, that when I hire, everyone has to be honest, because if you're not honest, then it's hard to create trust. And if you don't have trust, when you get into certain periods of change, that lack of trust will reduce your ability to be responsive and agile. So trust is a key to agility. So if people are not open and honest, that to me that's a huge problem. I think another common trait is you have to be basically indestructible. I mean, you have to be able to go with very little sleep. You have to be able to take bad news. You have to seek out feedback. You always ask people, what am I doing wrong? What can I be doing better? How can we be better? Some people don't like to do that. I think being smart really helps. And when I mean smart, I mean the ability to take in tons of information and not be overwhelmed and kind of see the patterns underneath. And that's not something that everybody can do. That being said, I do think that it's good to have differences on the team. I think different perspectives, different skills, different personality styles, because if you're all the same, if it's a monoculture, you're going to have blind spots, and the blind spots can sometimes get you. So I think this foundation of trust, smart, and really hardworking, together with differences associated with how you perceive things. Some people are maybe more emotional, intuitive, and empathetic. Some people are maybe more analytical. Having that kind of a diverse team, I think, really helps give you resilience on top of that foundation of trust.
We'll take a question from the audience. How do you interview for culture?
Oh, wonderful. I love it. How do we interview people? I think that's one of my favorite questions. First of all, I believe a face-to-face interview when you hire for some roles is really important. It's wonderful to have a person in front of you to get this glimpse of personality and how they behave, how do they respond to environment around themselves. I usually ask candidates to do some homework and basically present them with a problem which might be unique for my business, which might be something from my industry or one of my challenges. And I'm really keen to see how they deal with a challenge. Would it be something, will they give me a response which is valid for any company out there? Or would they actually go the extra mile and be creative and see this with a fresh look and just maybe give me something which can definitely help me and which just have this own thinking and creativity in it?
Jeff, you're nodding your head. Ilonka, you?
Yeah, I think what you're looking for people who are intrinsically motivated, who are really interested in what you're building. That's part of it. And then the culture comes, as you were saying, with giving examples, trying to talk about examples, and then see how they react in that specific circumstances. But you want people who are not only interested in building a startup, but building your startup. So building your product and have this drive, like you are in education, we are in HR. It's about people, about bringing people to the right jobs, about educating people. And you have to have that passion to do the right thing. And that's why you need to write the right people for that.
I think another thing is that people often think of culture as being kind of amorphous, but you can make culture very specific. You can ask questions about what value. I think culture is essentially what values do you say that you have, and what behaviors do you see actually happening in the company that either are consistent or not with those values. When I interview for culture, the first thing I start with is, what do I want the culture to be? And let's get specific here. So I want people to be self-aware. Now you say, well, so then I'd say, well, how do you interview for self-awareness? One of my favorite questions is, how are you most misunderstood? And you'd be surprised at the kinds of answers you get. And what is really wonderful is usually you catch people off guard because they're not expecting that question, and their first reaction is usually something emotional. It's like, oh, and then you know you're onto something. And then it's kind of interesting to hear how people are misunderstood, because the next question then would be, why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that you are different from what other people think you are? And then you can get a sense for, like, how well do people get feedback? How do they deal with feedback? How do they try to change themselves? And so I think you can be very specific about the culture and then think of clever questions that are not yes, no, right, wrong answers. They have to be, a wide range of answers could be the right one that will then give you an indication for whether someone's consistent with that, because the people that you hire will definitely set the culture through their behavior. So I think it's really important to hire leaders that exemplify the culture that you want.
Mm-hmm. Okay, going down the line, closing thoughts. What piece of advice would you share with startups who are looking to hire?
One piece of advice, hire right people for the right stage and hire a person. Don't hire experiences, don't hire curriculum. You're an innovative company, you are inventing, so hire the person and creativity. Don't hire CV, don't hire resume.
I guess mine would be, you definitely want to hire the person, but really you want to build a team. And my imperative, especially at this early stages of a company, is the key is what I call learn, change, grow. How fast can you go through that learning cycle so that you maximize the chance that you're going to be successful? And when you hire a team, A, hire people that will be able to do that, and B, have a process that as a team you run through to check how fast are we learning, how fast are we changing in order to get on the right track when the right track is not always obvious.
I think in the beginning, really use your intuition and the chemistry you have with people. Because if you have the right chemistry in a small team, it's extremely important. Later, hire more the professional skills and other skills which you really need in your team. So that would be my most important advice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.